And Neil, obviously this was Mitt Romney's debate to lose. How do you think he did last night?
I certainly don't think he lost it. I think, though, it was one of his wobblier performances. I thought a lot of times he sort of fell back on his talking points, sort of his slogans, particularly in response to some of the questions that Jerry and Kelly asked that were substantive questions that really were to give him a chance to explain his Bain model or to explain what he would do if Europe really started to fall apart. It was clearly Newt's night. I mean, Newt Gingrich owned the crowd. He got a standing ovation at the end of one of the sections, which is something we've never seen, at least in this debate session. It was his night by far, and it'll be interesting to see just if that shows in the polls and if he starts to catch up with Romney as a result.
And Neil, you know, South Carolina has a reputation for being, you know, something of a campaign killer, or, you know, something that can be kind of the validation of a candidate's legitimacy as an aspirant to the White House. Is there any reason to think South Carolina is going to play, you know, a different role this time around?
You know, we always think that, and as you point out, it does, you know, it has this record of picking the nominee in the end. And kind of funny way, it's almost becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've talked to a lot of people here who are aware of that and are just in some ways because of that pushing for Romney because they're pretty sure he's going to be the nominee. They want to make sure South Carolina goes with him. I do think that Gingrich is putting up a great last round fight. Last night was good for him in part because it got him sort of off the Bain, you know, kind of anti-capitalist thing and into other territory where he was really winging it, but doing it in a way that really seemed to resonate with the crowd. He was the only one that really captured people sort of continually.
And Neil, there was a lot of talk about the super PACs last night. We're going to listen to a quote from Romney from the debate on Fox last night about what Romney was saying on these super PACs, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the candidates were sparring over.
I would like to get rid of the campaign finance laws that were put in place. McCain-Feingold is a disaster. Get rid of it. Let people make contributions they want to make to campaigns. Let campaigns then take responsibility for their own words and not have this strange situation where we have people out there who support us, who run ads we don't like. We'd like to take off the air. We think are outrageous, and yet they're out there supporting us. And by law, we're not allowed to talk to them.
And Neil, of course, that was from the debate on the Fox News channel, and a lot of the candidates were sparring over whether or not the candidates have any influence on these messages that are going into the ads put out by the super PAC. Santorum certainly was criticizing Romney for not correcting some wrongs that Santorum thought were out there. Newt Gingrich, of course, on this other side of Romney taking aim as well. So did he make a case enough, do you think, that the voters will say he's, you know, come out and said, I do not agree with what the super PACs are doing?
It was a great moment. I mean, I thought it was a very strong moment for Romney, but on the other hand, it was like an odd combination of genuineness and disingenuousness at the same time. I think he's genuine in wanting to have this all go away, wanting to have a different campaign finance system, but on the other hand, he you know, has never really come out and separated himself from what his own super PAC has been doing, and has done it so effectively and so viciously, really, going all the way back to Iowa. So, and it was also a funny moment, as many people noted, because he talked about the disaster of McCain-Feingold. Of course, McCain is now one of his most prominent endorsers. So it was a slightly awkward moment there. But it's been a big issue. You know, the super PACs are way outspending the campaigns themselves. Down here, the airwaves are blanketed with super PAC ads. And it has become really the dominant force of this campaign.
Wow, ingenuous and disingenuous at the same time, isn't that the definition of a politician, Neil?
Yeah, if you can do it well.
Cynicism aside, now, you know, John Huntsman has abandoned the race at this point. As we winnow the field here, does anybody except Mitt Romney, you know, triumph as we get a smaller and smaller field?
You know, what's interesting, we're watching, of course, South Carolina and the polls here very closely, but at the same time, something's happening that I think is really indicative of where this is going, which is that for the first time in the national polls, Gallup, ABC this morning came out with a poll, we're finally seeing Romney move up towards 40%. You know, we were calling him the 25% candidate for all of last year. Now he's finally getting into the position where eventual nominees tend to be in the national polls. And he's basically twice what any of his closest competitors are. I think that's really indicative of where this thing is heading, no matter what happens here.
And yet, you still have a majority of Republicans who seem to be saying we don't support Mitt Romney. Is he going to get over that 50% threshold so that he can say I'm the decisive front runner?
I would assume he will, but I think even more important is will he convince those people, or certainly a larger percentage of them, to actually actively like him or maybe even love him, because it is going to be an election where there's going to have to be a lot of emotion on either side to bring people out. And I think the big question, and a very difficult one to answer about Mitt Romney, is can he engender love among his own, flock, so to speak, and enough ardor, or whatever you want to call it, to bring people over, either Democrats or independents, to vote for, because that's what will decide the whole thing. And I don't see that happening right now, but he has a lot of time to do it.
And of course, he got a big challenge from Newt Gingrich last night. As you mentioned, he got a standing ovation, very unusual, for a debate when he was talking about jobs. And we do have some of his sound talking about federal job assistance. Again, this was from the debate on the Fox News channel last night. Let's take a listen.
About this. All unemployment compensation should be tied to a job training requirement. If somebody can't find a job and they show up and they say, I need help, the help we ought to give them is to get them connected to a business-run training program to acquire the skills to be employable. Now, the fact is...
Now, what's interesting is he didn't say how we would pay for that job training, Neil.
Yeah, that's true. What was great about that moment, though, and you had to cut it off before then, but the whole talk was about 99 weeks. People are now getting 99 weeks of unemployment insurance. And this line that kind of came out of nowhere, he said, in 99 weeks, you can get an associate degree. Right. And it was classic Gingrich, because all night he was sort of coming up with things that, even for me, maybe he'd been saying these on some of his campaign appearances, but were fresh and as though he had just sort of thought it up right then. And that's what makes Newt Gingrich still such a force in these debates, because stuff comes out of his head and out of his mouth that is new, and that's just not happening with Romney, who's playing total safe poker right now, just not wanting to lose.
So is it you think Newt has a chance to catch Romney's heels at this point, or is it the foregone conclusion that Romney will be the candidate?
Well, I do think that there's a possibility that Gingrich could win here, and if he did, it would, make it a heck of a lot more fun going forward. It would give a whole new twist to Florida, et cetera, et cetera. We all know about the flimsiness of his organization and going into the future, contest down the road and how underfunded he is and all those things. So will he become the nominee? I think that's very doubtful, but he could make it fun still going, into February.
Fun for us anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure the guys actually on the stump find this all that charming.
Right, and I guess before we should go, just quickly, what was your assessment of Rick Perry and Ron Paul in this debate? We haven't spoken much about them.
Yeah, I thought Perry, a lot of people thought it was one of his strongest debates, but I think it was strong at the expense of stridency. He said some things that were just like, huh? Like, he basically called Turkey an Islamic terrorist state, or he said that the leaders were Islamic terrorists. And people were like, well, huh? And there were a few other things that he said that just were really kind of out there, but they got applause and they sounded strong. Ron Paul, he paints himself into his own corner a lot of time, particularly on foreign policy things. And when he equated going after bin Laden with the Chinese targeting a Chinese dissident in the United States, I don't think that kind of thing really works all that well in South Carolina or a lot of places. It was not his best night. I didn't think it was Santorum's best night either. I thought he was pretty marginal.